an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Son of a Trickster, chapters 38, 39, and 40. In these chapters, well, this is the end of the book, and so much remains unresolved. I am dying. But I'm really, really glad to see that Jared seems to be making an effort to improve his life. That is not an easy thing to do when it seems like nobody in your life is supporting you in doing it. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. Many thanks again to Robin for commissioning this entire book. I really feel like this book is a style that I have never read before. I feel like this was a really new experience, and I really enjoyed it. I cannot tell you guys how moved I was by the way she decided to wrap this up. What this author has done is create a world where magic and magical creatures and abilities are all real and fuck up people's lives and interfere with the way they live and interact with each other. And then she pushed all of that magic to the back burner and made real life issues the actual focus of the story. I feel like in some ways this could be done really badly. And it could feel like, I don't care about any of this bullshit. I want the magic. And don't get me wrong, I most definitely want more of the magic. I want to know what's going on, and I still don't feel like I've got a great grasp on that. However, she has made what Jared is facing as a person so real and immediate and alarming that I am much, much more invested in him being okay than I am in him discovering some kind of power, because I feel like she has made it really clear that if he were to discover some kind of power, that would not improve his life. And that's what I think so many stories that deal with magic, like urban fantasy, I guess is what it's normally called, magic that occurs in the real modern world. They make it so that a lot of the problems from day to day that they had before they knew about this power fall by the wayside and become secondary to issues that are brought up because of the magic. And she has really woven this world where the magic is incidental, which is so strange and could be, like I said, really frustrating. But I give a shit about Jared as a person. So I feel like this is the equivalent to me of giving somebody like a driver's license before they've even learned how to read. Him having any sort of magical ability or connection to magic when his day-to-day life is such a complete shit show would be a big mistake. It would be just him getting yet another factor added to everything that could serve to fuck things up even more than they are already. And that's really saying something. So anyway, I'm going to get into the story and then we'll talk about this, but chapter 38, Jared, we ended the last chapter with his mother telling him, "You've done everything you can." And me saying, like, maybe it's supposed to be that Sarah hurt herself, or maybe there's something going on with Miss Jax or her husband, Mrs. Jax or her husband. And I couldn't really decide which one I thought it was. And I hoped that Sarah hadn't done anything, because I didn't want Jared to have to go through another loss of that nature. But it turns out that is what happened. She's okay. She's going to make it. But things are not awesome. So 38 starts off with him going over to the house, and Dawn comes up, one of her aunts, and says Sarah's okay. She said she did some shrooms and she doesn't remember anything. The house looked normal until you got to the kitchen. Mrs. Jax put the back of her hand to her mouth as they stared at the damage. Dawn sighed. "We're on it," she said. They were lucky Sarah had cut herself in the kitchen. Blood was impossible to get out of carpet. Dawn brought Jared the bucket and mop and told Mrs. Jax to go watch TV. He could tell she was still shaken because she didn't argue. Mr. Jax's heavy-duty tranquilizers kept him zoned on the recliner. Jared rolled up his sleeves. So, this is a really bad scene. It takes a long time for them to clean all the blood up. And it's the kind of thing that you can actually smell the blood when you walk in the room. That's how much of it there is. I can't imagine walking in on this kind of scene. This is so... The things that Jared has endured and seen just feel so unfair. And they are unfair. Life isn't fair. But I really feel like I'm like angry at Sarah for putting him through this. And I know that's not fair. Sarah's obviously, first of all, dealing with some depression, but also she was on drugs. So, there's like a couple of factors here, and the depression is not her fault. The drugs she chose to take, so I'm holding her responsible for that. But there's also like the aspect of there being some kind of magic that she has a connection to and doesn't know about and can't handle. And I would really like it if something gets resolved in that department, because I would like her to be given the tools to cope with what she's been handed in life. But yeah, he spends all this time cleaning this up and thinks that he's got it. He brings Mrs. Jax a can of chicken noodle soup that he heated up and goes back in the kitchen and realizes that there's like this bloody handprint on the oven door where she probably like pulled herself up. Jared's mom got him out of final exams by faking a family death. He asked Dylan to drive him to school and back home. As he walked in, kids went quiet, and he knew they'd found out about Sarah. At some point since he'd last been to school, she had hot glued some flies in the shape of a heart to his locker door. She'd possibly been trying to remind him of the fireflies, but there weren't any fireflies around, so she'd made do with houseflies, carefully painting their butts yellow, which, if you didn't know her, looked nuts. He considered scraping them off, but he was getting enough unwanted attention just showing up for school. Wow. She hot-glued houseflies with their butts painted yellow in a heart on his locker. The amount of work involved in doing that is just so far beyond anything that I would have had the patience for when I was in high school that I'm almost impressed. So Dylan is bringing him home after he gets everything out of his locker and is telling Jared basically not to worry about it because he's had so many girls threaten to kill themselves that he thinks that it's like totally meaningless. They were mostly all talk and threats, except for Amanda, who said she was going to throw herself off the overpass and stay there all night with her friends and shit. We'd gone on a couple of dates, beers with friends, movie nights, nothing serious. But she was telling everyone we were going to prom and shit. It got intense. Then her parents got a restraining order on me, and my dad blocked their number, and she was going to all these houses so she could phone us. So this is one of those things where I don't really like Dylan, and I don't really trust Dylan's accounting of what happened. So he's making her seem like really unstable and crazy. And maybe she is unstable and got way too attached too quick. Like, it's not like that doesn't happen. But he just doesn't get the benefit of the doubt from me on that kind of thing at all. So he says something about how Jared can come stay at his house. And Jared's like, your parents are not going to like that. And Dylan says, well, they don't hate you. It would help if you didn't fucking irritate the crap out of them. And he winds up turning him down. And Dylan just drops him off at his house. His mother, meanwhile, is really not impressed. Sarah doing something so drastic doesn't move her at all. In fact, she finds it to be a complete irrational overreaction, which is really amazing coming from someone like his mother, who is so full of irrational overreactions from day to day. I cannot imagine how this woman has so little self-awareness that she can be like, well, that was just a crazy thing to do. Like, bitch, you're over here with grenades and, you know, busted up his entire room. Later on, she flips out on him because he's going to AA. This bitch has no business talking to anybody about overreactions. Just no, shut up. I warned you she wasn't ready. Didn't I warn you? Mom. What? She was trying to help in her own way. Thanks for supper. It wasn't even on sale, she said. I paid full price for that crap. A black Ford Explorer with a rental sticker on the bumper sat in the Jax's driveway. So, let's talk about Sarah's godforsaken mother. I'm so mad. I find it really interesting how good this author is at showing us the various types of parenting styles that there are in the world, and how you don't have to be like Jared's mom to still be bad at this. There's just all different types of abandonment and neglect out there, and they don't have to look the same for them to have a pretty similar effect. So she comes outside, this bitch. This is a delicate time. I think Sarah needs some space, okay? I'm not blaming you, but did you give her the drugs? No, Jared said. I don't like shrooms. But you didn't stop her. You know, it does kind of sound like you're blaming me. I'm not. I'm trying to understand how this happened. It happened because you sent your daughter to take care of your dying parents, Jared said, and she cracked under the pressure. That's what happened. I wanted to fucking buy this man a beer. Like, I was so delighted that he just fucking came out of the gate and said that shit. I was so delighted. Go, Jared, forever. You broke her heart. No, you dumped her like a sack of kittens on the side of the highway, and now you're looking for someone to blame. I think you should leave. You're covering your ass. I'm calling the police. I want you off our property. The deadbolt clicked, and he heard her slide the chain in place. Don't come back, she shouted through the door. You're not welcome here. This bitch. We don't see her again, I don't think, except for when she like comes and tracks down Sarah. But can I just say, I desperately want Mrs. Jax. I want to see Mrs. Jax flip out on this bitch and slap her face and tell her that Jared has done more for her family than her own daughter has. Because it's obvious. Jared helped clean up Sarah's blood, you piece of shit. And you're over here trying to blame him for her killing herself, or trying to kill herself, attempted suicide. Oh my God. Like, honestly, I am not somebody who is ever comfortable with anyone trying to blame any particular specific thing for someone attempting suicide, because there's always so many different factors that go into somebody making a decision like that. And it's rarely one thing. There could be something that sort of tips them over the edge when they had been considering it in the first place that makes them think that this is the best choice. But you have to have been considering that shit to begin with, usually. I'm not talking about somebody who, like, you know, finds out that the feds picked up on the fact that they've been, like, you know, skimming off the top for 20 years and they're facing time in prison and they decide to blow their own head off. That's a whole other thing. I'm talking about people who, you know, are obviously struggling with depression and mental health issues. This temptation that we have to pick a particular instance where we think, oh, if we had just handled that one thing differently, we could have prevented this whole thing from happening. I really get why that's an appealing thing to believe. I really do. It's simple. It kind of makes you feel like you've got some semblance of control over things because you have this like fantasy in your head that you can go back and do something to change the outcome. And it's just doing this one thing that is simple and straightforward and easy. It's not going back in time and treating this person completely differently for their entire life, or it's not going back in time and them slowly getting help and talking to therapists and taking different medications. It's not that. It's going back in time and making sure somebody doesn't dump them, or going back and them not losing a certain job. And it's really a nice thought that if this one thing hadn't happened, it would all be fine. But that's just not how that shit works almost ever. And the fact that this woman is a grown-ass fucking adult and has the nerve to lay this at the feet of a high school boy is so cowardly, so ignorant, so ugly. Like, it's a really cruel thing to try and lay on his shoulders. And I really hate this woman for this. Like, I feel like that is some unforgivable shit. And if we move into other books in this series and this bitch comes back, I am going to want some payback for that. You know, there's a lot of people in this book who do a lot of terrible, shitty things. And I feel like they need to suffer consequences for those things. But this in particular, after everything that Jared did for that family and how much he cared about Sarah and tried to get her to be serious with him, and she just really couldn't make herself commit to that. It's so incredibly off base that it's just extra mean. You know, this investment of time and energy that he put into this family, and this bitch can just come in out of nowhere and act like she knows what the fuck has been going on. Who are you? Get the hell out of here. You know, so yeah, this pissed me off so bad. I just kept going back and rereading the part where he just tells her, you fucking abandoned your daughter. Of course she flipped out. Like, yeah, good for him. His mom was cackling on the phone when he came through the front door. Yeah? She waved at him. Honey, you send the cops over if that'll make you feel better. If you were my mom, I'd off myself too, so I wouldn't have to hear your whiny, stuck-up, ball-curling voice. Fuck off, cunt, and stay. She looked at the phone and then at Jared. She hung up, right in the middle of our conversation. How rude. Some people, Jared said. I love this moment. Come here, she said, holding her arms open. I didn't mean to get you involved. No, that's not it. Her eyes watered. She blinked back tears. I'm sorry, Jared said. He hugged her hard. I'm sorry, Mom. Look at you, scaring respectable folk, she said. My baby has a backbone. Thank you, sweet Jesus. I was starting to think you were as spineless as your good-for-nothing daddy. I'm so proud of you. On the one hand, this is genuinely funny. On the other hand, this is such a bummer because of what winds up happening with her later. We'll talk about that, but I wanted to read this section out loud so that I could reference it again when we get there later. So, Jared goes to the beach and hangs out with Dylan and is just really not vibing with anybody there. And he starts texting Crash Pad about what he's doing and what's going on. And I really like the fact that this friendship between the two of them is sort of starting to like really turn into something, because Crash Pad obviously is the most grounded and balanced of the people that we have met via Jared so far. And Ebony comes by, and she is trying to sort of, he gets the sense anyway, suck up to him, because she clearly wants to go back into the cookie baking business with him. And in this scene, he's really kind of like amused by this, but also really irritated. And he backs away from it, but he's like, later on, thinking it over again, and it's sort of like, maybe I should just do, like, I need the money, and things can't keep on going the way they've been going forever. Maybe I should just, like, start doing that again. She apologizes to him about the video and everything. So there comes a confrontation, basically, between Ebony and Sarah, because Ebony drives him home. There's this weirdness where it feels like she's trying to use him to make Dylan jealous, and I kind of wanted Jared to like turn her down for a ride home, because I felt like he was inviting later drama with Dylan, even though we all know Jared is not interested in Ebony in that way. But I just really was surprised that Jared accepted. He must just have really wanted to leave, is what it comes down to. Sorry guys, I'm getting this buzzing from my notifications. So he's standing outside and he's talking with her and kind of reconsidering whether or not he wants to get in on this or not. And Sarah comes over in her Princess Leia outfit, which genuinely alarmed me until he sees the fireflies, because I was like, is this the fucking otter version of her? But then I was like, I don't know if the otters would show themselves to anybody else, or if they can be seen by anybody else, to be honest. Are the otters real otters? Or is this something that only somebody with magic in their blood like him could see? So the two of them start going back and forth with as cutting insults as they can muster. Jared's not going to screw you, Ebony, so go find another one of Dylan's dumbass friends to revenge fuck. I'm off, Eb said. Try not to kill yourself with your grandparents watching. I wonder who Dylan's screwing tonight. Let's check his Instagram and see which lucky lady is next. But what can you expect from a snotty head case who thinks she's so hip when she's trailer trash in dorky outfits? You're the one ashamed of your class, Sarah said. I'm blue collar to the bone. What the hell does that mean? Do you even know what you're saying, or are you ripping off lines you found on wackadoodle.com? It means my mother wishes I had your shallow-ass grasping, self-aggrandizing fashion whore herd mentality. You're the fucking cow, bitch. Moo, moo, everyone's wearing short sleeves today. Moo. Okay, Jared said. Ebbs, thanks for the ride. Sarah, I think your mom's coming to get you. Enjoy the funny farm, Eb said, revving her engine. I hear the long-sleeve jackets are especially becoming on sallow, pasty losers. I hope your spray tan gives you cancer, Sarah shouted. Classy, Jared said. These two. Not that it wasn't amusing to me in its way. It was. I love you, Sarah said. Jared studied her. I can't go there with you. We were so close. Sarah, you almost died. I had to clean up your blood. I never felt anything like that. It was like coming home, like being alive for the first time ever. I can't do this anymore. His mom stomped down the steps as Sarah's mom hastily backed up. The neighbor's lights clicked on up and down the street. The fireflies sparked and spun faster. "Do you see them right now?" Sarah said. "God, let it go," Jared said. She looked up. "I want to see them again." I have a really hard time with this. Mostly I'm feeling like a little annoyed at Jared's mom, and that's not fair because Jared's mom, in this regard, this isn't her responsibility. But I still feel like she's like the only person that I know of as a reader who has the information on this. And then I'm like, that's not true because Mrs. Jax knows. But the fact that Sarah's just kind of like left to figure it out in regard to her magic and wants to connect with it so bad, and like his mother keeps being like she's not ready. Maybe she's not, but she also doesn't know what the fuck is going on, so maybe somebody help her out. And Mrs. Jax like refuses to deal with her magic or let it out, but at the very least she knows it's there, and it doesn't feel like Sarah's aware. She knows something's going on, but she can't put her finger on it, and I want her to at least come at this with some sort of knowledge and education on the most basic level. And I feel really bad that she's so desperate to see these fireflies again, that he can see all the time, that she's like hurting herself and taking drugs and all this stuff, when maybe sitting down and having a fucking conversation with somebody would keep her from feeling the need to do this. I just find this really, like, weirdly cruel that they're leaving her hanging in this way. So, his mother had been shooting at Sarah's mom's car with the paintball gun. When we go back inside, Richie's like, "Hey, she grabbed the shotgun first, so you should be thanking me, because I'm the one who convinced her to downgrade." After he was gone, his mom tapped Jared's arm. "We should run through some protection spells." No. I'm done. So seriously done. No more magic." "You stubborn dumbass. You may be done with the magic, but that doesn't mean the magic is done with you." Yeah, this is also frustrating, and I appreciate that his mother's trying to get it through his head, but I'm sure that magic is the kind of thing that you can't, like, force on somebody. They need to be open and willing to cope with it, or else shit's not going to work out. So I'm pretty sure that there's no real point to her trying to push the issue, and she's just sort of waiting for him to come to his senses about how necessary this fucking is. Early in the morning, Jared woke and knew she'd be there when he got to the window. He could hear the fireflies and saw them like a halo over her head as Sarah stood on the lawn, looking up at his window, the sun sending golden fingers through the trees on the top of the mountains. He put his hand up and waved. She waved back and then put her hand on her heart. She didn't come any closer to the house, and he didn't go downstairs. They watched each other until Sarah's mother drove up and honked. Then Sarah turned and walked slowly to the black SUV, and they drove away. I really hate this. I really do. I get it. I don't think that this is a bad... I think he's handling this in as good a way as he really can with the equipment that he's got at his disposal as a fucking teenage boy. But this sucks. And then we have him saying goodbye to the Jaxes. The sequence of events that led him to the Jaxes' house that night would always remain fuzzy. Drinking had been involved. A lot of drinking. Jared found himself crying in Mr. Jax's lap as the old dude sat at the kitchen table. Jared knelt on the floor. Mr. Jax stroked his head, saying soothing things in Czech. Jared slowly became aware of Mrs. Jax and Dawn standing close but saying nothing. Jared wiped his nose. His throat was raw. "Sorry," he mumbled. She kissed his forehead. "You can stay here until we leave." "Don't go," Jared said. "We're going to miss you too," Mrs. Jack said. "Please, don't leave me." "Shh, drink your coffee, Jared. Dawn, can you take Peter to the garden?" Mrs. Jax reached over and held his hand. "It's been a hard go, hasn't it? I'm not afraid of dying, but knowing that Peter will be alone frightens me. The family tries, they do, but they have children and jobs, and my sweet Peter will be alone. I wish life was more fair, for you and for him. You deserve better. I'm sorry I was angry with you. I'm sorry I wasted that time when we could have been together. I wish I could take that back. I was wrong, and I'm sorry. You were good to Sarah. She was good for you." The uncles banged around upstairs, and Mrs. Jax flinched. "I'm going to miss you," Jared said. "I know everything hurts right now," Mrs. Jax said. "But don't drink your life away. Find love. Have babies. You're a good boy, Jared. I wish only good things for you. I wish this with all my heart." "Oh, Mrs. Jax, don't go. I hate this. I'm still, weirdly holding out hope that they're going to reconnect somehow, even though I just don't see it." So, Chapter 39, Summertime Sadness, is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. Jared is still seeing spirits, especially the grizzly bear is around a lot now. And his mother is charging people for beer and stuff when they come by, but she's broadcasting from pay-per-view for free, so it gets them in the door, and then they're spending money to buy booze and drugs and stuff. And it turns the house into a party zone in a much more intense way than it even was before. Summer was winding down, and his mom said he could drop out of school if he didn't feel like going back. She'd gotten by on her 8th grade education. Jared could bake cookies for her and Richie without a high school diploma. He was going to swing by later, and him and Dylan would get drunk and game, or just get drunk. So this turns into basically a montage of Jared and different random people that he barely knows, certainly doesn't like, coming to his house and using his room to get drunk, get high, or get laid. And Jared essentially standing by, completely plastered almost all the time. And these people, everybody who comes and uses his room for this are teenagers that wouldn't get kicked out of anywhere else. But Jared's mother has no standards for this kind of behavior. So they're fine coming to the house, and his room is sort of the place to be after a little while. His mom wouldn't kick them out as long as they were in Jared's room, and so they got to party indoors. He'd been picky about who he partied with before, but he found lately he didn't give a rat's ass. Besides, they weren't really hanging out with him. The kids partied together in the room while he drank or smoked himself unconscious. The bear didn't like it, and tended to sleep with his head through the wall, grumbling when things got too rowdy. So he goes on like this for some time. And this, for those of you who have seen, and I'm going to spoil a little bit of Breaking Bad here. Those of you who have seen Breaking Bad probably remember what it was that Jesse went through after he killed somebody. And it wasn't an accident. He went and killed somebody on purpose. And he can't really live with it. It's just weighing on his mind and on his conscience. And he's trying to drown out that voice inside by having constant crazy parties and essentially opening up his home to total strangers who come in, get high and drunk, graffiti the place, leave trash all over, pass out on the floor. It's essentially like a crack house by the time a few months have passed. And he is just letting himself get swept up in this in the hopes that he won't have to like cope with what he's feeling or going through. And it's really tough to watch. It goes on for a few episodes. It's not like, there's one episode of him spiraling and then he starts to get a hold of himself. It's half a season that he really is kind of in straight up denial, to be honest, about what he's feeling. And that's essentially what Jared is also doing. So finally, he's down at the beach, and he runs into Monster Gran, as he calls her. And it turns out she is his aunt, because her brother is Wiegert, the Raven, who is his dad. And Jared's suddenly like, oh wait, no shit. And she's like, yeah, listen, he's literally got hundreds of kids, 532. So I know that you feel like he has not had your back, but he has a lot to keep track of. And he can't be with one of his kids all the time. And he's just like, okay, I guess. Like, essentially, that's not really an excuse in my book, but thanks for telling me. And she says, he's not the giant whore that you would think either. We've been alive since these mountains were lumps of gravel, bare and treeless. When you've lived that long, you tend to accumulate exes and children. He got all the power, but I don't really care about that. I just want as normal a life as I can manage. So yeah, she's like so old, millennia old. And she's just trying to like go to Dairy Queen right now. I cannot. It's so funny. I love the fact too that there's like a description of them going through the drive-thru at the Dairy Queen. And the person waiting on them, this girl, is like super sullen and shitty. But his aunt is like really nice to her and tips her and everything. Like, I just love little details like that. Thank you, dear. You seem like you're in a lot of pain. I'd like to show you a place where you can find peace. Would you like that, Jared? Jared tasted his mouth and tried to remember the last time he'd brushed his teeth. Whatevs. They ended up at a church and walked down the steps to the basement. Jared felt mildly pissed off that she was religious and wanted to convert him. Some people were setting up chairs, and he could smell coffee. Jared poured himself a cup and saw Alcoholics Anonymous pamphlets on the table. Crap, Jared said. We can leave if you want to, Monster Aunt said. But give it a chance, please. Jared did want to leave, but he didn't have any pressing engagements, as Nana Sophia would have said if she was still talking to him. He had nowhere to go but home, so he drank his coffee and followed his aunt to some folding chairs at the back of the meeting. The room was warm, and he kept his head down as people filed in. He was worried that someone he knew would see him there. It started off boring, and the stories were sad, and sometimes they tried to be funny, and mostly weren't. They were broken, like he was, and they weren't trying to front anyone. They weren't pretending they were all right. They weren't faking a good time. He had a fuzzy moment, and he realized everyone had turned to look at him. Something about first-timers, and his aunt made him stand up, and he almost swallowed his tongue. Hey, I'm Jared, he said. I'm half cut, so I don't know if I'm supposed to be here. You're welcome here, Jared, the guy at the podium said. So he winds up sitting down, and then at the end, Dylan's father comes up to him. I want to shake your hand, Mr. Wilkinson said, and he held out his hand, and he was attracting attention, so Jared reluctantly shook. It took a lot of guts to come here. I wish I'd been as together as you are. when I was your age. I'm proud of you, Jared." Jared started crying, leaking tears, and then bawling and shaking and feeling like a phony and a loser. Mr. Wilkinson wrapped his arms around him and let him cry. "I'll take him home," Mr. Wilkinson said. The party at his mom's house was in full swing when Mr. Wilkinson drove him home. "I grew up in a party palace, too," he said. "Any time you need a ride to a meeting, you call me, okay?" "Okay," Jared said. "Look, I know you aren't sober yet, so this is a bit of a cheat, but I've got 7 of them, so I'm not going to miss one." He handed Jared a white chip. "Be safe." "Later." Jared went to his room, and Alex and his goths raised their beers to him. Jared lay down on his bed and listened to the party going on around him, turning the plastic chip over and over. "One day at a time," the chip read. On the other side, "Recovery begins with 1 sober hour." So, this is huge. I want to preface this by saying I do not believe AA is the end-all be-all of sobriety. I don't believe that you have to go through AA in order to get sober. In fact, there's a lot of really good reasons why AA does not work for plenty of people. But obviously, Jared needs something to hang on to in his life. And the way that he is spiraling out of control here, he's gonna wind up dead. You know, like, it's just either through a drug overdose, an accident while drunk or high, or because he just decides to let the otters fucking eat him. It's gonna happen. And he needs something. And thank you to Aunt Monster. So he writes to Granny Anita, his mother's mother, and is talking to her about, he says, "She told me about your time in residential school and the TB sanatorium, and I wanted to tell you I think you're tough. What you went through sounds like hell. I hold you in the deepest respect." And then he tells her about finding out about Wiegert and about meeting his sister. She says she's sorry her brother is such an ass. And he winds up kicking people out of his room finally, so they're not allowed to party there anymore the way that they had been. And then comes his mom. All right. So he kicks them out. He opens his textbooks. He decides that he is going to actually finish school. And his mother comes in. "You're home," his mom said, pulling off his headphones. "Hey," he said. She slammed the textbook shut. "You're like a Stepford kid now." "A what?" "A brainwashed robot. Fuck, I want my son back." "I'm still me, Mom." "You aren't. I never thought I'd miss your smart mouth or your smug fucking attitude." "I'm right here. Judgy and self-righteous, just like my mom." "I'm not judging you. I love you. You want me to quit drinking now, right? Stop partying, be a good fucking girl, and keep your legs fucking shut and obey everybody, right? This doesn't have anything to do with you. This is my sobriety. Can you stop quoting your cult?" "You don't have to change," Jared said. "You don't..." She whacked him upside the head. "Later," Jared said. He got up, and she shoved him back down. She leaned over and grabbed his chin. "Sitting there thinking you're better than me. You aren't better than me, you self-righteous prick." She shoved him in his chair, tipped over. Richie popped his head in. "Hey, babe," Richie said. "Got a sitch downstairs. I could really use your help." "Good," she said. "I'm in the mood for a massacre." Richie waited until she was clear of the room to shake his head at Jared. "Thanks," Jared said. "It's like you're spitting on her traditions," Richie said. "I don't think partying's a sacred part of our culture." "Yeah," Richie said. "I can see why she wants to murder you." Yo. Anybody out there who has experienced addiction and then tried to get sober recognizes this exact moment. This is one of the hardest things, I think, for people to cope with when it comes to getting sober. It's not even the withdrawals or the cravings or anything like that. It's the social aspect that can get really, really hard. And I'm talking about in a multitude of different dimensions. So we've got the social aspect in terms of there are people that you are only friends with because you get drunk together or high together or eat together or whatever your addiction may be. And when you decide you're going to change your behavior, there are a few things that happen. One, they get resentful that you are changing, and they do not like the fact that you are pointing in, and this has nothing to do with you really, like you are doing what you need to do for you, but they see you changing as an indictment of their behavior. That's the one thing, which is what his mother is experiencing right here, is her feeling like what he's doing is somehow him pointing the finger at her when it has nothing to do with her. Secondly, if those are your only friends, you suddenly realize if you want to be sober, you don't have any friends. And that's one of the tougher things, I think, is realizing that the people that you thought were your friends aren't really. They're simply your addiction partners. They're simply the people that you decided to be around when you got your load on. And you may not even like these people, or they may be in a worse situation than you in terms of their addiction, and you chose them to be the ones you hung out with because their situation is so much worse that it made you feel better about your own. And that's a really common thing, finding people whose addiction is in the later, more drastic stages, so that by comparison, you don't seem so bad and you can convince yourself that you really don't have a problem. Jerry has a problem. I don't have a problem, you know? And so realizing that like, that might be what this all was, and maybe we're not even actually friends. That's a big realization to come to, that you have people in your life that you don't actually even like, simply to feed a fantasy that you have about not having a problem, and that you filled your life with people who are toxic and bad for you so that you wouldn't have to look at the fact that things were toxic and bad for you. And then if you are somebody who lives in a place where, like Jared does, or if you're somebody who's like works in an office where everybody goes out for drinks after, it becomes well, how do I meet new people and make new friends when I don't do the thing that everybody else does in order to make friends and meet people? I don't want to go to a bar, but everybody's going to a bar. So how do I like manage this? How do I especially if you're working with people, how do I stay part of the team and socially have like a foothold in the culture of this company if I can't hang with everybody anymore? I won't be part of things. I won't be part of the inner circle. And in certain business environments, that's super important. So being sober is literally a threat to your livelihood. There is just, when people get down on addicts, I get my dander up pretty hard. It's just such a layered thing that's so difficult for me to, it's difficult for me to wrap my head around at times. And there are other things, though, that I can empathize with so deeply and see in myself. And I feel for Jared and his situation with his mom here a lot, because, you know, earlier she's like so proud of him for basically spitting in Sarah's mom's face, which Sarah's mom totally deserved. And she's like, "Oh, I'm so proud of you for having a backbone." She wants him to be as self-destructive as she is. And that is how she measures if he's a success as a son or not. And that's a lot. And he's obviously not like her in that way when it comes down to it. He'll get this way with people who really deserve it, who have hurt somebody that he cares about. But his mother gets this way with literally everybody. And like anybody who says anything to cross her, she completely goes from like 0 to 10 instantly. And it's inevitable that at some point she's going to do this. She's going to, I don't want to say disown him, but she's going to flat out be like, you are a disappointment. And I really feel bad for him because it, like I said, is inevitable. He's simply not the kind of person that she is. Thank God. But like she is puts so much store by being defiant that choosing to do anything else is, in her opinion, cowardly. And that's just not the truth. Doing things because you're afraid of being cowardly is in itself cowardly at times. Like doing things that you don't want to do that hurt other people because you want to like maintain this image that you have of being a hard ass. That's nothing. That doesn't, So, and this starts to happen with Dylan as well. I was talking about the social aspect. Dylan starts like picking on him when he sees Jared at work because Jared gets a job at the Dairy Queen. And Dylan shows up and tells him how he used to be cool. How fucking lame you're wearing a hairnet, the whole thing. I really love the fact that Jared just keeps on keeping on and does not let that sort of thing faze him. I'm sure it bums him out, but he just pushes through it. And that is a real testament to his strength of character. Dylan ignored him at school, his eyes grimly skipping past Jared like he was something disgusting to behold. But at night, Dylan drunk-dialed him and told him what he really thought about Jared stealing his dad. All the kids who used to party with him avoided him like he had scabies, lice, and bedbugs, and turned their faces away from him in the school hallway if he came near. The good kids seemed super nervous around someone who'd been hardcore enough to need Alcoholics Anonymous. It's like I've got the plague, Jared said to George, the only person in the school willing to hang with him. Welcome to my world, George said as they sat down for lunch. Sucks to be us. It really, really does, Jared said. Yeah, I really love the fact that he has this friendship with George. This is making things feel a little bit better. It's mitigating stuff a tad. So he gets a letter from his grandma, the maternal grandma. I was very happy to get your letter. I'm glad you and your mother are doing well. Anytime you want to visit me, you can come down. I don't know his sister. You be careful around her, though. Supernatural creatures don't think like us. If she's paying attention to you, she has a plan. They are very patient when they want something from you. Tell your mother I love her and I miss her. I'm sorry. I'm sorry 1,000 times. I hope to see you soon, Jared. All my love, thoughts, and prayers. Anita Moody. And that is the end of the book. I desperately hope that he goes and sees his grandma. He needs somebody to, help him. And she was so hard on him and so cruel, but it really does seem like she's genuinely sorry now. I would like to read the little author bio at the end of this, just to wrap this up, because I found it hilarious. Haisla Heltsuk novelist Eden Robinson is the author of a collection of short stories written when she was a goth called Traplines. Her two previous novels, Monkey Beach and Blood Sports, were written before she discovered she was gluten intolerant and tend to be quite grim, the latter being especially gruesome because halfway through writing the manuscript, Robinson gave up a 2-pack-a-day cigarette habit, and the more she suffered, the more her characters suffered. Son of a Trickster was written under the influence of pan-fried tofu and nutritional yeast, which may explain things, but probably doesn't. And that's it. That's where it ends. That's all it says. I fucking died. I loved that author bio. Just being like, so, most of the reasons that I write what I write can be explained by the diet that I was eating at the time. So yeah, that is the end of the book. This is just really compelling. And it ends on a hopeful note, even though so much has gone wrong. I love that Jared's drawing boundaries. I love that he's like learning what's healthy for him and really trying to like honor that. That is such a hard thing to do. And he's very, very young. And that's not something a lot of us are good at when we're that young. And I think in some ways he's probably good at it because he is so desperate that he knows this is basically life or death at this point for him. A lot of us, when we have to make these choices and do better for ourselves, it's simply a matter of being happier in our lives. And unfortunately, human nature is such that we're fine with being unhappy, weirdly. Like for the sake of things that are familiar or understandable or comfortable, we will deal with being unhappy and just totally feel like that's normal. Those stakes are much lower than the stakes that Jared's dealing with. This is not whether he's happy or unhappy. This is about whether he's dead or alive. And I really am rooting for this kid. I really like Jared. He's good. He's a good egg. Mrs. Jax is correct. He is a good boy in his heart and wants good things for other people and cares. And he just reminds me a lot of Owen sometimes. Like, honestly, Owen doesn't have these kinds of addiction issues and his family doesn't have this sort of drug history. But there is that like neglect and that eagerness to help other people. When he sees that they are also struggling with not being able to like manage their lives, or he has that urge to like step in and fill those gaps for people. And it's a really sweet thing to see. And it's part of what made me care about him the way that I do. So yeah, I think that's part of where my affection for Jared comes from, is seeing flickers of Owen in his personality. So thank you, Robin, for commissioning this book. I really enjoyed this. Hope you guys all have enjoyed the coverage. And there will be an episode coming up, and I should check and see exactly when that is. But somebody commissioned an episode of me talking about what books I've liked and recommend. Here it is. Okay, it's going to be at 2:30 p.m. on the 30th of April, which is a Tuesday. And it was Yama who commissioned it. Yama wanted me to take some time and talk to y'all about all of the books that I have read for the shows that I do, more than just Spoil Me, also Unspoiled, and talk about what I liked, what I didn't, what I recommend for certain people who like certain types of books, and what I think they should stay away from if there's things that are very triggering or whatever. So if you guys are interested in checking that out, come and hang out with me on the 30th. And that's about it. Thank you all again. And hopefully I'll see you maybe with the start of the next book. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.